In this video, we're going to take a look at setting up our spider. Now, our spider is going to be different from our skeleton and moss giant because if we look at our spider, we don't have a hit animation for when we hit the spider, but also notice the attack animation. The attack animation for this is basically it lifts its body up and this green glow forms. From that, we're actually going to be firing out this acid from its chest, basically. So we're going to have a different set of systems here. Now, first off, we have the behavior that it walks, does its idle, which is its shared behavior from the enemy. Ideally, what we actually want for this guy is to actually just go from idle to attack and just stay in the corner and just constantly repeat that behavior. And the idea here is that we'll have our player have to avoid it. So for instance, when it goes into its idle, it will attack and we'll have to jump over its effect, its acid spray, and then we can go ahead and slash it. We'll say it takes one hit to kill it. But basically we want to go ahead and eliminate this behavior. So in this instance here, right now it's inheriting from the enemy script. We're going to actually make it so that it has the unique behavior of just idle to attack. So to do that, let's check out our enemy spider. Let's stop playing. Here's our enemy spider and the sprite. Let's double click the controller to open up the animator view. And currently we go from idle to walk. We're not going to use any of this. We're just going to use our idle. So here it is here. And currently it's going to just loop on idle. And that's exactly what we want. So here you go. It's looping idle. And after that, it will then go to the attack animation. So we need to create that attack. So on your spider, underneath your sprites, we have a spider attack. Let's go ahead and splice this, make it multiple. This is going to be a 512 pixels per unit. Let's open up the sprite editor and slice by grid size, 512 by 512. And that's actually too big, as you can see here. So let's go ahead and make this 256 by 256. Slice. Alrighty, and this should be okay. Looks like they're even squares around each one, which is what's important. Let's save that. Set the pixels per unit to be 256. And hit apply. All right, once we've done that, we now need to create this animation. Open up your animation view, select the enemy spider sprite, create a new animation, and let's call this attack. And we're going to save this underneath sprites, characters, spider, animation. Once we've done that, we can take frames 0 through 30 and drag them in here. We can sample it, and there we go. So let's go ahead and set this to about 30 frames per second. And that's exactly what we're going for. So while that's green, it's basically going to load up and fire out one of those effects. Alrighty. Let's save our scene. Let's hop back into the animator view and create a transition. So we're going to go from idle, and then once we play our idle, we're going to go to attack. And after we play our attack, we're going to go back to idle. The transition duration is going to be 0. We don't want to fade. Let's save this, run Unity, and we should see the expected result. So we're in idle and then attack. Idle, attack. And you can see here that it's doing its movement code. So right now we have a bug here where it's following the parent logic. We need to now adjust that. So inside of the spider class here, we are going to override. We're going to override the movement method. So public override void movement. And instead of calling base.movement, we're just not going to do anything. We're just going to say sit still as a comment. By saving this, it now has no ability to move because we've isolated it from the parent by overriding that function. We're giving it its own unique movement behavior, which is just transitioning it from idle and attack. And there you go. Idle, attack. All right. So we have our idle and attack. Now what we need to do is we need to actually create the ability for it to fire off every time it goes into that attack mode. Let's have it fire off one of those effects. So we need to create that acid effect. So let's go ahead here and let's animate that. We can open up the sprite sheet here, make sure it's in multiple. Open up the sprite editor. Let's slice this, grid by cell size. Let's do 64 by 64. All right, that's too small. We can try 128 by 128. All right, and that's still too small, so we're gonna go with 256 by 256. And you'll see here that gives us exactly what we need. Hit apply. Pixels per unit is going to be 256. Hit apply. All right, and what we can do now is we can now create an animation and a controller, and essentially we're going to be instantiating this out. So to create that animation, here's our acid. We need to take the first frame, drag it into the hierarchy, set the order and layer to 50. All right, and we can see it here in the game view. Let's call this acid. Call it acid. From there, we're going to create a new animation for it. So with the acid selected, hit create. And let's go ahead and call this acid effect. And we'll go ahead and put this inside our sprites, effects, animations, and we'll put it with our sword arc. Once we've done that, we can hop into our sprites, our acid, and grab frame 0 through 15 and drag it into the animation view. And if we look inside over here, we should be able to see it animate. All right, so at 60 frames per second, that's what it looks like. So we might be able to adjust this to maybe 20 frames per second. And it looks just like that, pulsating blob. All right, once we have that, let's save our scene. We want to turn this into a prefab because we're going to be instantiating it from our spider. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to create a prefabs folder. So go to create a new folder. And let's call it prefabs. All right, and within that, we'll drag the prefab acid. Okay, you can delete it from the scene. And the goal here is that when we are in our attack mode, we need to basically say, hey, go ahead and fire this off. Now, in order to do this, we're going to introduce something called animation events. Animation events allow you to basically call a function, that can instantiate something. And I'm thinking that's the best way to do this. One thing we could also do is we could possibly have some sort of function in our code that checks what animation state it is, and when it's in the animation attack, it fires off this acid ball. But I think the best way to do it is going to be to create a script to handle firing of this acid ball. So to do that, what we're going to do here is we have our enemy spider, and on the enemy spider here, or on here, to do it the Unity event method, you'll see here that we have something called add event. And by adding an event, like say we wanted to right here, let's find the frame where we actually glow. So right about here, right, we're charging up. Let's go ahead and fire off one of those balls. Right here, we can add what's called an event. So if I click this add event here, it adds an event and it's looking for a function that I can call. Well, that function can be a script that communicates with the spider and says, hey, go ahead and fire one of your balls. We'll set that up in the next video.